as has been described recently, which I thought was an interesting term, that, you know, the drug trade is like a sort of hourglass, you know, loads of producers at the kind of like local farming plantation end of it, but shifting the product into these key markets like, you know, the US, Britain, Europe, the Far East. You know, it's a small elite that has got the capability, the skills and the power to do that. And then it fans out into this bigger sort of bottom of like street dealers the world over. And I find that, you know, where the Yardies...
It's a great comparison. You might well hear me using that soon.
I've
got this.
Well, you take it because I stole that one myself.
No, it's a very good concept. Now, there's been a lot of noise in the UK press about the country line gangs or county lines. Yeah. Been away too long. County line gangs. So. And the model you see in the press is basically London gangsters that we like talked about go to whatever it is, Southampton, go to Winchester, go to like little town somewhere, basically go in there, take over the local heroin selling or whatever, beat the crap out of anyone who stands in their way, and it's like theirs now. It's kind of the model we hear about, and also this idea of recruiting like young teenage kids from London or from whatever, like recruiting them and kind of schooling them and like, you know, this idea of kind of child abuse. Now, how true is that model? How true is that what we're hearing? You know, what's really happening there, do you think?
Right. So the interesting thing about county lines is that it's the term emerged a few years ago, again, via the media, and which was being influenced by messaging they were getting out of police forces like the Met. So they were getting this message out there, this term county lines. It became popularized, but as a process, as a way of doing business, this has existed for decades already. Excuse me. The difference, however, and why it sort of took off as a term compared with, I mean, one term that used to be used way back when, before county lines were, you know, became a popular term. People would talk about going country. To go country was to go out into the sticks and try to set up some sort of operation there. I mean, and we're talking about operations that were often very low level, very sort of shonky. You know, this is not sort of some big kind of like, you know, Genovese kind of Gambino crime family sort of like business. This is like one or two operators going into a territory and chancing their arm. So there would be this term about going country, or sort of people would say going cunch.
Right, yeah.
Years before county lines became a term. What then happens, and of course, just to sort of clarify, years ago when characters would go, would go country, what would happen, or a typical way that this would come about, is that, some character or other would meet someone in the prison network. They would forge an allegiance within prison. That person would, convict A, let's say, would say to convict B, oh, listen, I'm from Bury, I could move a lot of like what you're talking about, that you're moving down in South London, like there, hook me up, come and talk to me when I'm out. That's sort of, I mean, that's a very sort of simplistic way of sort of putting it. But again, because of geography, because of, and what you got to bear in mind, or I think anyone listening to this, has to bear in mind, is that Britain is a very small but densely populated country. So you've got this kind of concertina effect of like, you know, you got 65 million odd people, you know, which is all right, a good sort of 20 million less than Germany, but like in a country that's like maybe a third the size of like Germany or what it geographically, and it's not contained in one great big sort of, you know, chunk of landscape and, you know, and kind of coastline. You know, we're an island, we're small, but compact. London is, you know, 7.5, maybe 8 million people who, you know, who knows? So moving around or networking with different people from different parts of the country that are outside of the general kind of like criminal radius presents opportunities to do business, because if you're, you know, if you're part of the traditional London, the traditional British kind of like gang or criminal underworld, you're London, you're Birmingham, you're Manchester, you're Liverpool, you know, you're Leeds, you're Sheffield, and then, as we were saying earlier, you then break down to these smaller kind of like families and whatnot, and these sort of like tasty brothers who might run a particular estate and etc. in a particular part of a small town or whatever. Over time, though, that you know, that genealogy of criminality has changed. Those people just don't exist anymore for many reasons. One of the things that's killed them is industrial activity. You know, the lack of industrial centers and economics in particular areas has just changed the nature of families in these places. So that tasty family, you know, like, oh, the Matthews family up in like Runcorn, well, they're not there anymore. So if kind of like, you know, if whoever, you know, if, I don't know, let's call them like, you know, it's like, you know, let's call them like the Clapham posse just decides, you know what, let's just send a couple of bods up to Runcorn. Like, it's going to be like, in some ways, you know what I liken it to? In some ways, it's what I see very much as internal colonialism. It's like you and I saying, let's get a boat, yo, and like, and we'll just sail on the first island that we hit, we take it over. And like, you know, we go there and like, there's no one here. We put a flag in there and we're like, right, we own this. We find like there's some breadfruit there maybe. Well, and
it's part of this, the mentality. I mean, the impression I get is part of the mentality. There's always a mentality among Londoners that in and outside of London and the Southeast are like weaker than them. And like less, in a way, less than them, you know, in a kind of in a mentality.
Yeah, there's a certain arrogance there, I think, in that. Yeah, in that sense, yeah.
Easy pickings, soft, kind of soft. Yeah. So I mean, I remember a kid. I bumped into a kid, you know, years back. A kid I'd gone to sixth form with in Brighton, who then got into selling weed around Brighton for a while, and then basically some guy or some crew came down from London and robbed all their stuff. It was like basically like, you know, oh, that'd be easy pickings. So
right,
that kind of thing of, and then they were like in a stick to the people who supplied them, and so there's kind of like idea of simply going, you know, let's just go down to Brighton, rob some drug dealers, or we can take over their turf.
Yeah.
But what about that whole narrative about this idea of kind of brainwashing kids, you know, kidnapping and schooling? 15. Yeah, is that a real thing you see?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a real thing. One of the contributors to my book Gang London was he's in his let's say his mid-20s now, but when he was his late teens, and you know, and this kid, he's been involved. He's a sort of like affiliate, let's say. He's done a bit of time for like possession of a firearm, and has, you know, he's had problems with violence and dealing. But you know, he's a smart kid in many respects. He is indicative of the type of kid that gets involved in this sort of activity, and he, at one point, had got in with a little crew up in North London, and they took hold of him and they shipped him out to Margate, and told him to go and, you know, plot up somewhere. They had a place set up already, and on his first day there, he was dealing outside of this premises, and a guy came up to him wanting to score, and he goes to do the business with him, and the guy pulls out a hypodermic needle and puts it to his eye. And he says, you know, basically fucking hand over the goods or I'm gonna shove this in your eye. And so the dealer was robbed by the junkie. Now, this is one of the things that, again, it's not an uncommon feature anywhere in the world, but there's a lot of this happens in the UK because often the junkies are far more savvier than the dealers. Why? Because the dealers are these kids that have been taken out to various parts of the country. Why? Because they're cheap. Again, there's, you know, economics plays a big part in all of this. You know, and Britain is is really at the high street end of supply. We're not so close to the, you know, the production that we get it at a good price where, okay, look, we can be sensible about this. It's competitive at the lower level. So they're recruiting, where a lot of the danger is.
They're recruiting kids, putting them on the street, paying them, really bad cuts. Whatever it is, like not, you know,
it's
like,
less than minimum wage.
Yeah, like paying them, just basically saying, "I will give you the like super low cut," rather than that. And that way, the people are making their money off it, and they're not really at risk because the police are going to arrest the kid on the street
precisely
and not arrest them. So that's the way they're operating there.
Yeah, precisely. Where these kids are at risk, and as happened to to my guy, he lasted for a couple of days. He said on that particular op, and he told his people, "Look, you know, I'm out of here," kind of thing. They went back. They went down to Margate. They got him, bundled him in a car, put a knife to his throat. They were threatening to kill him and then dump his body out of the car on the way back to town because he'd lost the drugs. Obviously, he owed them now. This is not an uncommon thing, even to the point where people have been known to be set up in these situations.